at their conference, which was in Palm Springs. And one of the most notable things that I learned of this award winner that I'm going to introduce is I had a conversation with her husband. And before she began the organization, I see you right there, thanks, yeah, even with the glasses on. But her husband, and he told me a story about when she was thinking of the idea of the organization and where she was. She was literally in the kiddie pool in the backyard with her child, just writing down notes and ideas. Is that not commitment? I mean, she still watched her child in the pool. So I just thought that was an amazing story. And then the second thing that I took away from their conference was my now favorite T-shirt, as long as it doesn't get old and raggedy. It's like says most likely to change the world. And I was like, I resemble that. So I think if we all wore a T-shirt like that, you could wear it around on our chest like a Superman or Superwoman or something, like most likely to change the world. So, but the folks, she joins a very esteemed group of this award. We had Carl Perkins, Marion Wright Edelman, Thurgood Marshall, Saul Kahn, who also received this award. So it's my pleasure to present the 2024 James Bryant Conant Award to Angela Jerabek, founder and executive director of the BARR Center, for a lifelong dedication she's had. So just as we bring her out, a little bit more about them. So this celebrates the positive impact and the results actually that BARR Center has had in communities they are involved with, and the bipartisan support. I got a chance to witness that at the conference as well. So BARR stands for Building Assets and Reducing Risk. So this approach now is growing across the country, and they really live out the principles and the values of the name that they have. And I don't want to delay Angela anymore. I want you to hear more from her, but really tune in and listen, because she is so bright and so smart and so passionate. So if you would, join me in recognizing Angela Jerabek.
Well, thank you so much. It is an incredible honor to be this year's recipient of the James Bryant Conant Award. So 25 years ago, I was a school counselor in a first-ring suburb outside of Minneapolis. Half the students failed a class for 5 years in a row. Went to speak with my principal with thoughts of resigning. He said, problem wasn't me, wasn't our school, and this problem was endemic across the nation. And he said, why don't you come up with a better way? So fast forward a couple weeks, I was playing with my children. I had my 6-month-old son in my lap, and my 4-year-old daughter, Haley, was playing across from me. My daughter proceeded to pick up a handful of crayons and take a bite out of them. I thought we were past crayon stage at age 4. So now I'm not feeling great professionally. All the students are failing. Not feeling great as a parent. So what do? You call your grandma. My grandma is my go-to. She never missed a beat. She immediately reminded me that when she dropped Haley off at Sunday school the week before, Haley went right over to a girl who was really shy. And oh, Haley was so brave at the playground and the monkey bars, and she wanted to make sure she knew that Haley was one smart little cookie. Well, 2 things hit me in that conversation. First is, I was a much better parent when I had information about my child from another adult when I wasn't there. Second thing was, I was focusing on everything that wasn't going well. My grandma was focusing on the strengths, on the positives. I thought, we have the same issue at school. Each teacher only has the information they have access to for 43 minutes. So even though the math teacher says Kai's not doing well in math, he has no idea that Kai's doing really well in English, let alone the information I have as his counselor that he's really active in his synagogue and really involved in community gardens. The fact that the students were failing courses was not a reflection of them. Our students are incredibly talented. It also was not a reflection of my colleagues. My colleagues were amazing. The failures were a reflection of the system. The state of education of our country is hopelessly outdated. It's an assembly line that was built for factories to produce things, It's not one that produces and supports humans in schools. It shoves kids and teachers into separate silos and blocks everyone from seeing and realizing potential. I realize we have to redesign the school. We got to focus on 2 pillars. One is data, the second is relationships. The data needs to be real-time data, both quantitative, attendance, behavior, grades, that is shared among the adults, as well as qualitative data, what was happening in the classroom, out of the classroom, what was happening in the athletic fields, at recess, between friends. We had to focus on relationships, student to student, staff to student, and especially staff to staff if we were going to have honest conversations about that data. And we absolutely had to start and focus on strengths. What was working and how are we going to leverage that? And name the model BARR, building assets, reducing risks. So the first year of implementation at our school, our failure rate dropped in half, kept dropping over the next decade. There also was a drop in risky behaviors. Smoking, drinking, suicide ideation, suicide attempts. At the same time, there was an exponential increase in numbers of students taking honors courses, so much so that ACT named us the College and Career Going Model of the Year. Our successes were for all of our students, but the biggest impact was for our students farthest from opportunity, Black, Latino, students living in poverty. So BARR was helping us to realize the strengths in our community with our same students, our same staff. What was different? Better results. The results were better for everyone, both for students who were struggling as well as those who were seemingly doing well. During the early years of implementation, there was an honor student who was the captain of multiple sports, president of the National Honor Society, but because BARR ensures that every single student is discussed multiple times a month by teams of teachers, she was being discussed. One of her teachers said, she has straight A's in her classes and she's still asking me for extra credit to get her percentage up. Next teacher said, she seems really withdrawn. Third teacher said, she's been wearing baggy clothes. Let me call her parents. The next day, the parents called the school. Daughter had been hospitalized because the parents had taken her to the doctor and her vitals were so low. She was later diagnosed with an eating disorder. She had support from the school as well as from her parents. She went on to a very competitive college. She went on to law school and now was a very successful attorney. None of those early indicators are traditional things that we would be able to note, but when people put their observations together, the schools were able to work with the family to make sure that student was thriving. So now I've got 10 years running our school. This thing is humming, and I'm thinking this should work any place. We're not touching curriculum, we're touching staff, we are using the resources that are there. But I'm incredibly protective of the education profession. So I'm not going to tell another educator to do this unless we know definitively it works. So I wanted national data and evidence. It's what led us to the Investing in Innovation I3 EIR grant competition. If BARR wasn't effective in a given setting, I wasn't going to tell anyone to try it. But I wanted to test it on the East Coast, the West Coast, urban, rural, and I wanted to make sure it was effective. Now keep in mind, I'm the school counselor on special assignment in Minnesota, and I now want to test this thing nationally. So I couldn't exactly go door to door to schools asking if they want to do it. So in comes the power of relationships, one of our pillars. I have a long friendship with a leader in Maine, and I said, do you think there are any rural schools in Maine that would want to try this and participate in a national study? She said, why don't you come to Maine, we'll find out. So a colleague and I spent the week driving across the state of Maine in the middle of winter of 2011. Our path literally started on a gravel road as we went door knocking from school to school to say, hey, this is what BARR is, do you want to try it? And by the way, do you want to do a national study? So the challenges I had previous in middle school selling candy bars door to door, nothing compared to this. Finally, after many, many declines, the superintendent of Bucksport School District in rural Maine looked at our data, thought the idea made sense, and signed on. Hemet, California signed on soon thereafter. Over the next 10 years, the American Institutes of Research conducted the most rigorous research that can be done. Randomized control trials. Rarely, if ever, done in education. Many of the issues are people said you can't build a schedule for this. Well, have you been a high school counselor? I can build a schedule for anything. So I'm like, we can do this. So we went anywhere people said it won't work there. So we went to large bureaucratic districts. We went to Dallas, we went to Boston. We went to charter schools, south side of Chicago. We went to under-resourced communities in Appalachia. We went to schools labeled low performing, and we went to schools that were doing well to say if it still made an impact. And by the way, this may shock you, relationships and data make all humans better. So, research that BARR was confirmed to be 20 statistically significant impacts for students and teachers. Math and reading scores go up in 1 year. Graduation rates increase. Disciplinary incidents and suspensions go down. So does chronic absenteeism. Students reported feeling supported, engaged, and experiencing high expectations. Staff reported being satisfied in their work. They were more effective, they used data to inform their work, and they're collaborating with their colleagues. So BARR was added to the What Works Clearinghouse 4 times. It was cited as evidence for ESSA 5 times. Now I want to make sure I draw attention to the impacts on the staff. BARR is not only better for students, it is better for staff. The outcomes AIR captured are proximate measures to teacher retention, which is also what our schools are reporting. ACT Global, the oversight evaluator for the 172 federally funded education grants, presented this slide. As you will note, BARR had the largest impact in all the grants for academic readiness, knowledge or skills for students, and BARR would take the top spot in teacher outcomes. So a recent Heckinger report summarized the data from that $1.4 billion federal investment. They said that only 26% yielded positive results, but BARR was the poster child of what that grant program was hoping to produce. So BARR is not a silver bullet. It is hard work, but it's also why educators chose this profession. Educators have known forever that relationships and data matter, but in order to make them real, we have to have them be more than just concepts. Our research showed that these impacts can be gained in 1 year. With coaching and training, after 3 years, a BARR can work independently in the BARR system and their outcomes continue to grow. The really exciting part is what these impacts and studies were showing was the talent that our students and our teachers have. Educators are professionals who want to see the whole child and they want to be empowered to make changes. BARR doesn't bring in answers from the outside. It knows your staff, knows your community and students best. Rather, it's updating the archaic assembly line that we all inherited and allows your staff to see your students in 3D. What I can't emphasize enough is that these studies confirm the talent that we have in our country is amazing. So what we were doing was groundbreaking, and almost no one knew about it. The reason was simple. To keep the studies clean, we were asked to not communicate the work. The embargo ensured we had the integrity results, but it also meant that BARR is gone unseen. In addition to the hard data that was being gathered, the stories that the schools were sharing were truly transformational. In one of our large study schools, it had 1,000 ninth graders. And a team of teachers was discussing a group of 14-year-old girls in the beginning of the year. One of the teachers said, "They're missing my class every Friday. They're late every Monday. Someone should give them attention." Next teacher said, "You know what? When I go through the cafeteria, they're not sitting at the ninth grade table. They're hanging with a bunch of senior guys. Somebody should give them a quiet lunch." Third teacher said, "You know, they're not making dress code. They should get a dress code violation." Well, upon those teachers working with their BARR coach, it turns out those girls were being sex trafficked. They were being shipped out Thursday night. They were being shipped back Monday morning. They were all in foster care. Each of those teachers had a tiny little piece of information, but when they put it together, they were able to see a much larger and tragic picture in what was happening. The pride that those teachers had in terms of being able to change those students and other students' life is truly palpable. Those educators have chosen this profession to help students, and BARR helps them be able to see who the student is, see those strengths, and really be able to problem solve. I want to take a couple minutes to thank some incredible leaders who've been supporting this work. First is Dr. Melody Shop, former State Secretary of South Dakota. She became aware of our work about 5 years ago and has been tireless in sharing this with her colleagues. The next is John King Jr., the former United States Secretary of Education under President Obama. He's also the current chancellor of the SUNY system. He oversaw the I3 competition and has remained a champion of this work. Then there's Superintendent Kirsten Baszler of North Dakota. She learned about BARR about 3 years ago. She brought it to her state, as well as she shared it with her department and her governor. Governor Burgum spoke about BARR at his Conference of Innovation this past summer. She's also been wonderful in sharing with her colleagues, one of which was Dr. Eric Mackey. Dr. Aaron Mackey from Alabama has been supporting BARR in his state, including visiting a BARR school this past fall. Their staff was so honored to host him and so proud of the results that they had had, because they once again were the ones who had the solution when they were able to see the student and empowered to make those changes. Minnesota is where BARR began. The demand for this coaching is very high, as many schools participated in the research. Representative Cheryl Yochim and Senator Mary Kunish led the work for bipartisan authored legislation last year that funded 18 more schools. And Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan of Minnesota is a tremendous champion of BARR. She spoke at our conference this past year. And then there's Commissioner Pender Macon from Maine. Commissioner Pender heard about our research. We knew we started in Maine, and so she wanted to respond to any schools that had heard about BARR and be able to allow them to do this. This is last spring. So she put out a call last May. She later shared she thought maybe 3 to 5 schools would take her up on this offer because they had to begin the following fall. 71 schools signed on. Another 30 have just signed on. Almost 20% of the schools in Maine are now using the BARR system. I also want to thank my family. My husband is here, has been incredibly supportive and patient as I've been on this wonderful, crazy, exhausting, and somewhat incredible journey. So we've now expanded from 1 school in the Midwest to 350 K-12 schools throughout the United States, serving over 350,000 students. When people ask me what my goal is for BARR, I always say, this is the way schools should operate everywhere. It recognizes the inherent talent educators have, and it leverages the strengths that we have in our community. And because we actually know it works after 20 years of research. So I want to accept this award on behalf of teachers, administrators, district leaders, researchers, coaches, and trainers who walked beside me over the past several decades as we better serve our students and staff. So 5 years ago, we started hearing our BARR educators say that our students were most likely to change the world. 4 years ago, I extended that phrase to the educators. They're the ones who are seeing and supporting this talent. I'm now extending this phrase to you. We know we have something that works to support our nation, our students, and our staff that really realizes the incredible talent we have. You are the leaders that can make that change, so you too are most likely to change the world. Thank you.